In this video, I'm gonna show you how to play the Tekken games on PC with the best settings. That is the main games Tekken 1 through 6 and Tag Tournament 1 and 2, including the PSP and the PS3 versions of Tekken 5 Dark Resurrection. We'll start from the beginning with the PS1 games. If you're planning on buying on Amazon, please use my affiliate link below in the description. Any product on the website will count and you will be directly supporting the channel. For the PS1 games, we're gonna be using the Duckstation emulator. This is my favorite PS1 emulator for PC. And here on this main page, where the link will be on the description of this video, you're gonna click on this Windows button. And to download the emulator, you're gonna click on Download Duck. But this emulator requires VC++ runtime in order for it to work. And if you played games on your PC before, it's likely that you already have this installed with you. But if you're not sure, you can go ahead and click here on this Download VC++ button, download the installer, and it will tell you if you have that or not. And from there, you can proceed with the installation or move on to the emulator itself. But go ahead and click on Download Duck. So when you download that, it will be on the zip format. You're gonna have to extract this file, and you can do this with WinRAR or 7-zip, depending on what you have. I'm gonna personally recommend you to use 7-zip. I'll put the link of that on the description of the video. So you're gonna go there, download and install. And once you have that with you on the Duckstation file, you're gonna click on this with the right button of your mouse, put your mouse on top of 7-zip or WinRAR, depending on what you have, and then click on extract here. And in just a few seconds, you're gonna have the emulator files. So now you can go ahead and delete the original zip file. We're not gonna need this anymore. But before starting the emulator, we're gonna create a portable file here on the same folder. So on this folder, anywhere, you can click on it with the right button on your mouse. It will bring up this window, and you're gonna put your mouse on top of new, and you're gonna select text document, and you're gonna have this file. But now you're gonna rename this file. So you're gonna type portable in here, exactly like this, and then press enter so that the file is saved on this folder. Now we can start with the actual emulator. So you're gonna double click on this Duckstation release LTCG file, double click on this one, and it will bring up the setup wizard and also all the necessary folders of the emulator. So in case you're gonna move the emulator around, they're all gonna be on the same place. And it's also gonna be useful for the setup as well, which we're gonna get into. Now here on the setup wizard, you have the option to change the language of the emulator and also the theme as well. By clicking here, you can see what they look like. I'm just gonna keep mine on the default one, and then go ahead and click on next. Now you have to select the BIOS folder for this emulator. And because we did the portable installation, the BIOS folder is this one right here. So you're gonna double click on this folder, and this is where you're gonna drop the BIOS file for this emulator. Now, the BIOS file for this emulator is usually on this .bin format, and there are a bunch of BIOS files out there, and they're all gonna work on this emulator. But you're gonna have to find this BIOS on your own. Once you have the files with you, you're gonna go back to the setup wizard, and you're gonna locate the region of your BIOS in here, and you're gonna see it show up as well. It can also show up on other regions too. It doesn't really matter as long as it is on the right folder. So I just selected mine here. Once you have that, click on next. Now you have to select the folder where you want the emulator to scan for your games. This can be anywhere on your PC, but what I like to do here is on the emulator folder, I right click to bring up this window again, select new and then folder, and I just create a new folder here called games. This is where I'm gonna be dropping the game files. But like I said, this can be anywhere on your PC. And you can see here the supported formats for this emulator. And you can also just insert a disk file on your CD drive as well. It will also work, so that's gonna be up to you. If you're gonna select a folder, click on add. And on this window, you just have to navigate to your game folder location. In my case, it is this games folder, right? So I just click on this one once, then click on select folder. And now you're gonna see this option here to scan this folder recursively. This means that if you have a folder inside your games folder, the emulator will find the games in there as well. So you're just gonna go ahead and click on yes. And also you can add multiple folders as well. It does not have to be a single location. You can add as many folders as you want. Once you're done, click on next, Now we have to set up your controller or your keyboard if you're going to use that. And this emulator has an automatic mapping function, which means that it will do the complete controller configuration for you. And this emulator supports pretty much all the controllers out there from PlayStation and Xbox, and even third-party ones as well. So if you don't have your controller plugged in, go ahead and do that right now. And you're gonna click here on this automatic mapping button. And you should see your controller list here. In my case, I'm using the Xbox One controller. So if I just click on this one, the configuration is pretty much done. If you're going to use a keyboard or mouse, you just have to do the same thing. Automatic mapping and then pick your keyboard. And if you're going to use a second controller, you just have to do the exact same thing here, but for controller port 2. There's also a more detailed controller configuration. I'm gonna get into that later on in the video. But now click on next. And there you go, the setup is complete. Now if you just click on finish, the emulator will appear. This would be a good time to subscribe to the channel and also leave a like on this video. For a more detailed controller configuration on the emulator, you're gonna click on settings and then controllers. This window will show up and you're gonna head over to controller port 1, and here you can do the automatic mapping configuration again, or change the individual inputs of your controller port 1 or 2. Now let's add the Tekken Games on this emulator. If you followed what I did, you have the games folder with you, right? So obviously this is where you're gonna be dropping the game files. So I have all 3 games here on the CHD format, but there is also the bin and Q format. That's gonna depend on how you find it. You're gonna have to find these games on your own as well. And once you have them on your folder, you're gonna click here on scan for new games, and they're gonna show up in here. Now we are going to tweak the emulator settings so that we can play these games with the best graphics and performance, and the same setting works for all 3 games, so we only have to do this once. So start by clicking here on settings and then click on interface. This window will show up, and right here on interface, these settings are more personal, like if you want to double click the screen to toggle the full screen, or hide your mouse cursor when you are on full screen as well. So this one is gonna be up to you. I'm gonna keep mine on the default settings. Now click here on BIOS, and here we have the option to skip the PS1 startup screen whenever you start the game. By just clicking here on fast boot, the emulator will skip that and go straight into the game. There's no harm in activating this option. It's not gonna cause any bugs or glitches or anything like that. So this one is gonna be up to you. I'm gonna keep mine enabled. Now click here on console, and on this section, we have the option to drastically reduce the loading times of all 3 games using this CD-ROM emulation section right here. But before that, first, we have to overclock the CPU of this emulator. So right here on CPU emulation, you're gonna click here on enable clock speed control. This message will show up. Click on yes, I will confirm bugs with overclocking. And the percentage that I found that works for me is leaving this one at 150%. No more than that. And now on CD-ROM emulation, you're gonna change the read speed up to 10x and the seek speed up to infinite instantaneous. And like I said, this will drastically reduce the loading times of all 3 games. But in case this doesn't work properly for you, go back here to CPU emulation and increase the percentage a bit further here. This will not overclock your computer CPU, by the way. This is just the CPU of the emulator, so it's safe to use. The worst thing that it can happen is the emulator crashing. Now let's go to the emulation tab, and we have an option here to reduce the input lag of this emulator a little bit. And you're gonna do that by first enabling the optimal frame pacing. When you do that, this option will become available, and you're gonna click here on reduce input latency, and you can reduce this one all the way down to 0 milliseconds. Using this option will require a bit more of your CPU and GPU, so if you notice lag in-game, then come back here and deactivate this option. Now let's head over here to the graphics tab, and on top where it says render, Vulkan is the one that works the best for this emulator most of the time. But in case Vulkan isn't showing up for you, that means your GPU does not support it. If that's the case, you can select either Direct3D 11 or 12. They also work pretty well on this emulator, but I think Vulkan works the best most of the time. So I'm just gonna select this one here, And on adapter, this is the GPU that you want to use for this emulator. That is your main GPU in case you have a dual setup on your computer. I'm just gonna select mine right here. Now right here on the bottom where it says rendering, the first option, we can increase the resolution of your game on this emulator. This can make your game look much better depending on how high you're going to increase this one. But of course, by doing so, it's going to require more of your computer. It can go all the way to 32 times the resolution here, but if you're not sure, you can just increase this one a little bit to something like 3x native for 720p and just keep increasing this one until the game is looking really good, and of course until your computer can handle that. Next, on aspect ratio, you're going to change this one to 16:9, and we're not going to be stretching the screen with this option here because we have a widescreen rendering patch on this emulator. These patches are already built in on this emulator and they work pretty good for all 3 Tekken games. So you can play these games on your 16:9 monitor without having the image stretched out. Also, this PGXP geometry correction is a good option here to have it enabled. This will get rid of the wobbling effect that some games have, especially the Tekken games, so this one works well for the trilogy here. Also enable the force 4:3 for FMVs, because since we are using the 16:9 aspect ratio, it will stretch the FMVs if this option isn't turned on, even with the widescreen rendering cheat as well. You can also add a post-processing effect on this emulator, and there's one that I like using sometimes. It's called CRT Lotus. Right here on post-processing, click on add, and then select CRT Lotus here. If you're going to use one of these effects, make sure you click here on enable post-processing. Most people miss this one out. And this CRT Lotus effect is going to make your game look like if you were playing on a CRT monitor, if you want a more old school looking. And if you are going for this one, I would also recommend that you click here on graphics, then click on downsampling, click on box, and you can select the intensity of the downsampling here. I would not recommend going to anything higher than 2x. I think this one looks good enough actually. And if your computer can handle as well, increase the internal resolution to the highest you can, something like 4K resolution, because then this effect will look even better. Finally, this is it for the settings, so you can click here on close. And you can also add cheats to the games you have here on the emulator, and it's pretty easy to do. I'm gonna use Tekken 2 as an example. First, you have to start the game. I'm gonna do it with Tekken 2, double click the game. Then you're gonna select here System, and then click here on Cheats. When you open for the first time, it will ask you if you want to enable just for this game or for everything. In this case, I'm gonna show just for this game right here. Now you're gonna click on System again, select the cheats, now go to Cheat Manager. And it's going to list all the cheats available for this game. And activating them is as simple as you just have to click on each one of them. Like, let's say I want to have infinite health for player 1, and just like that, it's in. But in some cases, in some games, I mean, you have to restart the game for them to take an effect. So just to be sure here, I'm gonna click on System, then Reset, restart, and now the cheat is going to be enabled here. And with this, you're ready to play the PS1 Tekken games. Now let's move to the PlayStation 2 games. So the first thing we're gonna do is download the emulator itself, and it's available here on this website. I'll put the link on the description of this video. And right here on the main page, you're gonna click where it says latest nightly, and then click on download for Windows. This tutorial is for Windows PC. So this is the version we're going to be using here. So click on that to download to your computer. So the emulator file is a zip one, and you're going to have to extract this, and you can use either WinRAR or 7-zip. I'm personally going to recommend using 7-zip. I'll put the link of that on the description too. So download and install that. And once it's in place, you're going to right click on the PCSX2 file, select 7-zip or WinRAR, depending on what you have, and then click on extract here. Now these files will show up, and you can go ahead and delete the original zip file. We're not going to need this anymore. And before starting anything else, first we have to create a portable file on this folder so that we have all the emulator folders on the same place. First thing you're going to do on the window folder, you're going to click here where it says View, and make sure that this box is enabled, the file name extensions. Click on that, and by doing so, you're going to see the extensions of all the files in here. But what we have to do here is anywhere on this folder, you're gonna click on the right button with your mouse and then select New, and then you're gonna select the text document file. So now you're gonna erase everything that's in here, and the name of this file has to be portable.ini, exactly like this. Now go ahead and press enter, and it's gonna ask you if you are sure to change this. Go ahead and click on yes. Now we can start with the installation. So double click on this PCSX2.exe file, and it's gonna show up the setup wizard, and you're gonna see all of these folders in here. That means you did this right. So now on this setup wizard window, we have a few options here to change the language of the emulator and also the theme as well. I'm gonna go ahead and start with the default one. So when you're done, click on next. Now we have to select the BIOS folder. And because we made that portable file, it is this folder right here. But you can go ahead and click on open BIOS folder, and it's gonna take you there. This is the folder where the emulator is going to scan for the BIOS file that is required for this emulator to work. So I went ahead and dropped the BIOS file that I have with me, and usually this BIOS file comes in this .bin format like this, and this BIOS is also copyright protected, so I cannot show you here on the video where to get it because it is against YouTube's guideline. So you're gonna have to find this on your own, and there are a bunch of BIOS files out there, a bunch of different versions, and all of them will work just fine. It does not have to be the one that I have in here. So now back on the setup wizard, with the BIOS file in place, you're gonna click on refresh list, and if you did it right, you should see the BIOS file in here. So now just click on it once and then select next. Now we have to select the folder where we want the emulator to scan for your game. What I like to do here is go back to the PCSX2 folder, and I like to create a new folder here called Games. And this is where I'm gonna be placing the games files, but this can be anywhere on your PC. And once you have that in place, click here on add, and you just have to navigate to the folder where your games are gonna be. I'm gonna select the games folder. I came up, so click on that once and then click on select folder. Now it's gonna ask you if you want to scan this folder recursively. That means that if you have a folder inside the one you picked, it's going to find the games in there as well. So go ahead and click on yes, and you can also add multiple folders too. It does not have to be a single one. And once you're done, click on next. Now we have to set up the controller, and this emulator has a automatic mapping function. That means that it's going to find the controller that you have, and it's going to do the configuration for you. And you can also use a keyboard as well, but this emulator supports pretty much all the controllers out there from PlayStation and Xbox, and even third-party controllers too. So what you have to do here is, if you don't have your controller plugged in, go ahead and do that right now. And when you do that, when you click on automatic mapping, you should see your controller here. In my case, I'm using a Xbox controller, so it's showing up as this option. So all I have to do is click on this one, and the configuration is pretty much done. And if you're going to use a second controller, you just have to do the exact same thing as well. There is also a more detailed controller configuration on the emulator. I'm gonna show you that in a bit. And when you're done, click on next, and we're pretty much done with the setup. So now just click on finish, and just like that, the emulator will appear here. For the more detailed controller configuration I talked about, here on the emulator, you're gonna click on settings and then select the controllers option. And on this window, you're gonna click on controller port 1, and here you can do the individual mapping of your controller if you want, and also choose the automatic mapping configuration again. Now for adding your games, it's pretty much the same as Duckstation. If you have your PS2 game disc with you, you can either click here on system and then select start disk, and it's gonna start as such, or if you have it as a file like I do. In my case, I created that games folder right here, and this is where I'm gonna be placing the game files for the Tekken games. One of the most common formats for PCSX2 is having the game as a ISO, but having them on CHD also works as well. Now you're gonna go back to the emulator and then click on scan for new games, and they're gonna show up here. Now we're gonna tweak the emulator settings so that we can play these games with the best graphics and performance too. And the same setting works for all three games right here. Let's start with the general settings. So you're gonna click here on settings, and then click here on Interface. This window will show up, and on the Interface tab, these options here are more personal. I would say stuff like if you want to toggle the full screen by double clicking with your mouse, or you can also hide your cursor while playing the game in full screen. I'm going to activate this one actually, and this one is going to be up to you, really. Change this one based to your liking. Now let's head over to the BIOS tab, because we have the fast boot option here. This setting will basically skip the PS2 startup screen whenever you start the game. So if you want to go straight into the game, this is the option you want to have enabled here. And it is safe to use. This won't cause any bugs or glitches or anything like that. It's safe to use. Now let's head over here to the emulation tab. And here, the first setting I want you to look at is here on System Settings, is this one here, Enable C-DVD Precaching. This will drastically reduce any loading times on all 3 Tekken games. It is a massive speed up, and it's safe to use on all 3 Tekken games. So I'm gonna go ahead and activate this one right here. Next, we have the frame pacing and latency control options, and there is one setting here, this one, optimal frame pacing. And by activating this one, this will help a little bit with the input latency when you're playing the game. It's going to reduce that to 0 frames, and this can help with the input lag, but using this option will make more use of your GPU and CPU. So if you notice a slowdown when playing the game, come back here and deactivate this option. Now let's go to the graphics tab here, and the first option, renderer. Vulkan is the one that usually works the best on this emulator. You get the best performance out of it, but if Vulkan does not show up, that means your GPU does not support it. If that's the case, the second best renderers in my opinion are Direct 3D 11 or 12. They are also pretty good, but Vulkan is the one that performed the best for me for a very long time. So I'm going to choose this one here. And on adapter, this is the GPU that you want the emulator to use. In this case, your main GPU, if you have a dual GPU setup, that is, so just choose the one you want to use here. And now here on display, on aspect ratio, you're going to change this one to widescreen 16:9. Tekken 5 already has native 16:9 support, but 4 and Tech Tournament does not. But this emulator has the widescreen patches that you can activate to your games that's going to do that work for you. It's not going to stretch the screen to 16:9. It's going to patch that so that it's displayed correctly on a widescreen monitor. And it works pretty great on all 3 games, and you just have to click here on Apply Widescreen Patches to enable them. Since you are here, I would also recommend the Apply No Interlacing Patches as well. They will make the game look even better. Keep everything else on the default. Now let's head over here to the Rendering tab, and on the first option, you can increase the internal resolution of this emulator. By increasing this one, it will make your game look much better, but it's going to demand more of your PC. So you can start testing this one with something like 1.5 resolution and just keep increasing this one until you get a good image, and until, of course, your computer can handle that. Next, on anisotropic filtering, change this one to 16x. This will make the game look much better, and it has minimal impact on performance here. On the audio tab, leave everything on default unless you know what you're doing. And we're pretty much done here with the general settings, so you can click on close. And to start your game, you just have to double click here on the selection as such, and you can start playing. Also, on Tekken 5, it is a good idea to go here to Options in Game and go to Display Settings and change the screen ratio to 16:9, even with the widescreen patch enabled on the emulator. And I also like playing the game with the video mode set to progressive. I think the image looks sharper that way here. I personally like that, but this one is gonna be up to you. Now let's head over to Tekken 5 Dark Resurrection on the PSP. We're gonna start by grabbing the best PSP emulator for PC. The link will be on the description, and right here on the main page, click here on download. And this tutorial is for Windows, so this is what I'm gonna use here. And I would recommend just getting the zip file portable version because it has all the files needed in one folder, good to go. So go ahead and click on this one and download it to your PC. It will come as a zipped file, so first we have to extract this one using either WinRAR or 7-zip. Just gonna click here on extract here, and you can go ahead and delete the original zip file. You're not gonna need this anymore. And to start it, you just have to double click here on PPSSPP Windows 64 and it will start. The first step is selecting the folder where you want the emulator to scan for new games, and for that you're gonna click here on Browse and just select the folder where your games will be. In my case, I'm just gonna use the main PPSSPP folder like this, and it will do the change for me. One of the most common game formats for this emulator is having the game as a ISO, like this one. So now if you just restart the emulator, the game will appear right here. Or you can also click on this refresh button if you had the emulator open before, and the game will show up as well. Now we're gonna tweak the emulator settings to get the best settings on this game, and you're gonna right click the game and then select game settings right here, and this window will show up. And on the first setting on graphics, the best backend for this emulator most of the time is Vulkan right here. So if you do have this one, select that. But if your GPU does not support that, then I would recommend Direct3D 9 or 11. Some people even said that Direct3D worked better for them than Vulkan. So if you do have Vulkan, try with that one. But if you want to experiment, you can also choose Direct3D as well. So when you select the render, you have to restart the emulator. It's gonna take you back right here when it's done. So click on restart. Now right click the game once again, select the game settings one more time, and the option below backend rendering resolution. In this one, we can increase the resolution of the game on this emulator, but it's gonna demand more of your PC to play the game at a higher resolution than the native one right here. So you can experiment right here, test with something like 2x the resolution, and just keep increasing this one until you get a good image, and until, of course, your computer can play the game at 60 FPS. I'm gonna select 1080p because I know my computer can handle that and the image looks good. For the anti-aliasing MSAA, click on this one and set this to 8x. And also there's an option to go full screen on the emulator, but you can also press F11 when you start the game. That works as well. And also VSync, if you see some screen tearing when playing the game, you have to activate this option right here. But hopefully that does not happen to you because VSync will introduce more input lag. Now we're gonna scroll down here a little bit and arrive at the texture scaling option here. And on upscaling type right here, the one that I really like to use most of the time is by qubit here. But this is an option that you're gonna experiment yourself to see which one you think looks the best. And when you select that on upscale level, I would not recommend going beyond 2x right here, because then the upscale type effect is going to look really strong, and I think it looks a bit ugly actually when it's too strong like that. So I just keep mine here on 2x. Now on the next setting, texture filtering, you can increase the anisotropic filtering here to 16x. This will make the game look much better, and it has minimal impact on performance, so it's safe to use most of the time. And also click on texture filtering and change this to auto max quality. And that's pretty much it for the graphics setting. Also here on the bottom, you can select to show the FPS counter and also the speed of the emulator as well. This one is gonna be up to you. Now we're gonna head over to the controls setting here, and this emulator has an automatic mapping function, which means that it's going to do the controller configuration for us in just one click. So right here on the first option, you're gonna click on control mapping, and now if you don't have your controller plugged in, go ahead and do that right now. And this emulator supports most controllers out there from PlayStation and Xbox, and even some third-party controllers too. And also your keyboard as well. If you don't have a controller, you can play this with the keyboard just fine. So now when you have your controller plugged in, you're gonna click here on auto configure, and the emulator will detect the devices that are available to use. In this case, I'm using a Xbox controller, so it's gonna show up right here. So all you have to do is just click on this and it will do the configuration for you. But if you want to change any individual input, you can also do that by clicking here on the button and then pressing on the controller the button that you want to assign this to. And when you're done, click here on back. And on the audio, you don't have to change anything else unless you know what you're doing here. These settings will work just fine. And with that, we're pretty much done here on the settings. So click on back. And to start the game, you just have to click on the icon right here and it will start as such. Now let's head over to the PS3 emulator to set up Dark Resurrection, Tekken 6, and Tag Tournament 2. The first step is grabbing the emulator itself, and it's available here on this website. I'll put the link of it on the description of this video. And right here on the main page, you just want to click here on the download button. And this tutorial is for Windows 10 and 11, but RPCS3 is also available for Linux and Mac OS. So go ahead and click here on the download button. It will come as a zipped file, so you're gonna have to extract it, and you can use either WinRAR or 7-zip for that. I would personally recommend using 7-zip. I'll put the link of that on the description of the video as well. And right here on this file, you just have to click on it with the right button, select WinRAR or 7-zip, and then click on extract here. It will generate all of these files. You can go ahead and delete the original zip file. We're not gonna need this anymore. And to start the installation, you just have to double click here on rpcs3.exe, and this window will show up. And there are a few settings here. I would not recommend using the dark theme yet. We can configure this later. And just go ahead and click here on do not show again. And I have read the quick start guide, so we can click on continue. So go ahead and click here. And just like that, the emulator will appear here. The first thing we have to do here is install the PS3 firmware, and we can get that on the official PlayStation website. This is the place right here. I'll also put the link on the description of this video. And right here, you want to scroll down a little bit to this page and go to where it says how to update PS3 system software, and you're gonna click here on update using a computer. It will unlock this next section, and right here you just have to click on download PS3 update to get the firmware. But if the download doesn't start when you click here, then you have to click on this button with the right button on your mouse, and then you're gonna click on copy link address, and you're gonna paste the link on your browser, and then you're gonna press enter, and the download should start that way. So go ahead and download the firmware. I dropped the firmware file on the same location as the emulator itself. It is this file right here, ps3update.pup. Now you want to open the emulator once again, and you're gonna click here on file and then click on install firmware. It should open the emulator folder by default, so now you just have to double click on PS3 update to install the firmware. In case this file is not showing up here, then you have to come here to the bottom right side of the screen and then click on PS3 update file, and then you're gonna select all files. This way it's going to list everything on this folder, including the firmware file. So go ahead and double click on that, and it will install the firmware. This shouldn't take long right here. When this window show up, click on OK, then just wait until this is finished. So with this part finished, to add your games on the emulator, we're gonna use this games folder here that was already created by the emulator when you installed everything here. This will be the default folder that it will scan for new games. One of the ways that you can make your games be scanned by the emulator is having the game files inside a folder like this one, but this will only work for Tekken 6 and Tekken Tournament 2 in this case, because Tekken 5 Dark Resurrection was only released as a digital game on the PS3. In that case, the game format that will work on the emulator is having the game on the PKG and RAP combo. The PKG is the game files itself, and the RAP is basically a license file for the game. They can also be ripped from your PS3, but you're gonna need a custom firmware for that. Now, back on the emulator, if you had your emulator open, you can just restart it, and then Tekken 6 and Tekken Tournament 2 will appear. But for Tekken 5 Dark Resurrection, we have to install that on this emulator. And you can do that by clicking here on File, and then click on Install Packages. Now on the emulator folder, you're gonna double click on the games folder, double click on the Dark Resurrection folder, and you can just select the PKG and RAP at once. Just click and hold the left button on your mouse to highlight them, and then click on Open, and it will install them on this emulator. And just like on the PS3, Tekken 6 and Tekken Tournament 2 have to be updated. It is not required, however, to update your games here on the PS3. You can play them without the patches, just like you could on the PS3, but by not updating them, you're gonna be missing out on the fixes and improvements that these patches have brought back on the PS3 as well. And there is an easy way to update your games here. using this tool right here, Rusty PSN. The link will be on the description as well. And right here, you want to click on whatever it is, the latest version available. And under assets, the file you have to download is this one here, Rusty PSN Windows.zip. This is the one you're gonna need. So go ahead and click on this one to download to your computer. I downloaded the file to the same RPCS3 folder we have been using. This is a zip file, so we're gonna have to extract this with either WinRAR or 7-zip. Inside this, we only have a single file, the rustypsn.ex. So I'm gonna drag this file from the zip folder like this. And before we start Rusty PSN, I'm gonna create a new folder here on RPCS3. Right click on it, select new folder, and I'm gonna call it updates, because this is where I'm gonna be downloading all the updates I'm gonna get. So now you're gonna double click on Rusty PSN, gonna open as such, and you're gonna click here on this little gear, and now we can change the download location of the updates. I'm gonna use that one folder that I just created, so click here on pick folder, navigate to the RPCS3 folder, and then I just have to click on updates once, then click on select folder like this. Now just click on save settings. Now to download the patches, we're gonna need the game's ID code, and we can get that on the emulator. It is this serial code right here. And to copy that, I'm gonna start with Tekken 6. You're gonna right click the game, select the option from the bottom, copy info, and then gonna click on copy serial. Now go back to Rusty PSN, paste the code right here by pressing Ctrl V, or you can right click this and select paste. Now click on search for updates. And then it's going to list all the updates for the game. In this case, there's only one for Tekken 6. So I'm gonna go ahead and click here on download file. And you just have to do the same thing for Tag Tournament 2. But before that, make sure you click here on clear results. Otherwise, it will not find the patches here. It has to be clear. And then right click the game again. Select copy info, copy serial, back on Rusty PSN. Paste the code right here. Search for updates. Wait for them to be found. There you go. Click on download file, and we're finished here. So you can close this now. And to install the patches, you're gonna click on file once again. Now click on install packages. Now on the emulator folder, you're gonna double click on the updates folder if you followed what I did. And here we have the serial code for each game. I think this is Tekken 6. So open that and inside the patch. So you can just double click on this one. There you go. Click on yes to install, and do the same thing for Tag Tournament 2. Install packages, serial code, double click the patch like this, and there you go. Now the games are fully updated. For installing DLC on Tag Tournament 2, the process is the same as if you were installing Dark Resurrection. You need the PKG and the RAP file. I have it here with me. This is the DLC files for the Character Pack A, the PKG, and the RAP. You must keep these files with their original name, by the way. If you rename them and try to install, you're gonna get an error. But when you do have it with you, you're gonna go back to the emulator, click on File, and then click on Install Packages. Now you just have to navigate to the folder where they are, and just select both of them in one go with your mouse. Then click on open, and there you go. The DLC is installed. Regarding the emulator configuration, all three games work fine on the default settings, but I like tweaking the settings a little bit just so we can squeeze out better graphics on these games here. And there are two ways you can change the settings here on the emulator. The first one is by clicking on config, which will change the settings on all games in here, or you can do them individually by clicking on the game with the right button and then selecting here create custom configuration. I'm gonna use the first method because the settings are the same for all three games, but this one is gonna be up to you. So I'm gonna start by clicking here on config, and on the CPU tab you don't have to change anything. Right here on the GPU, on renderer, make sure that you have Vulkan selected here, but if your GPU does not support that, you're only gonna have OpenGL, in which the game will work, but the performance will not be as good as Vulkan. On an isotropic filter, change this one to 16x. This will make the game look better and it has minimal impact on performance. And if you want to increase the game's resolution, you're gonna keep the default resolution at 720p here, do not change this one, and you're gonna use the resolution scale option here. All three games work fine all the way to 4K resolution, but of course, if you are going to increase this, it will demand more of your computer. So you can start with 100% and increase this one a little bit until your computer can handle that. Next, here on the emulator tab, I like disabling the show trophy pop-ups, PPU compilation hint, and shader compilation. These are notifications that will happen on screen whenever the emulator is doing one of these, and they can be very annoying, especially the shader compilation, which is something that this emulator does constantly, so I like turning this one off. And that's all you have to do here. Go ahead and click on apply, and then save. Now the only thing left to do is to configure your controller, and you can do that by clicking here on paths. And this emulator also has a automatic mapping function, so if you don't have your controller plugged in, go ahead and do that right now, or your keyboard, you can also play with that. And regardless of how you're gonna play this, when you have your device connected, you're gonna click here on handlers, and it will list the devices available on this emulator. In my case, I'm using a Xbox controller, so if I click here on X input, it will do the configuration for me. If you have a keyboard, then you select this, and so on. If you're going to use a second controller, you're gonna click here on the Player 2 tab and do the configuration again. But make sure you pick the pad number 2 right here under devices, and then choose the handler again and do the same thing. You can also change any individual inputs on your device here as well. And finally, when you're done, click here on save, and we are finally ready to start the game. So you just have to double click on the one you're going to play. And when you start it for the first time, it's going to compile these PPU modules, but this shouldn't take long. It's going to depend on how strong your CPU is, and you only have to do this for the first time you start any of these games. I have many videos like this showing you how to install games on PC with the best settings for graphics and performance. So if you like what you saw, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like on this video, and check out my other stuff. Thank you for watching, and as always, I'll see you soon.